Welcome to the deep dive.
Yeah.
We're here to cut through the noise, get you well-informed, quickly, thoroughly.
That's the plan.
And today, we are diving into a really captivating work of art. It's Édouard Manet's 1867 painting, The Execution of Emperor Maximilian.
A fantastic choice.
Our mission, really, for this deep dive, is to peel back the layers, to see how Manet didn't just paint a scene, but subtly challenged how we even understand seeing things, visual perception itself.
Yeah.
And some of the insights might genuinely surprise you.
Oh, absolutely. It's true. This painting is just such a classic example of Manet's groundbreaking approach. It's incredibly complex, layered, and it really does invite us to think beyond just what's immediately visible on the canvas.
Okay, so let's zoom in a bit then. When you first look at the execution of Emperor Maximilian, the immediate visual impact is pretty striking, isn't it?
Definitely.
It's just so crowded.
Yeah.
Figures all squeezed together, almost uncomfortably so.
Precisely. You see all the figures, they're pressed into this very narrow, small rectangular ground, almost like they're standing on a step or a kind of terrace.
Right.
And this creates a really strong horizontal and vertical impression within the composition. It pushes everything forward towards the viewer.
And something else that really stands out, for me anyway, is that prominent high wall in the painting.
Yeah.
It's fascinating because this execution piece, even though he finished it first,
Yeah.
it shares so many characteristics with another famous Manet, The Balcony at the Opera. That wall feels familiar.
That's a great point. And what's intriguing about that wall, it's not just that it sort of aggressively encloses the space. It basically acts as an extension of the painting itself, creating this sealed, almost claustrophobic scene.
Yeah, sealed is a good word.
But then cleverly, it also opens up just a bit. You get these minor characters watching the execution, small scenes kind of protruding beyond or even over the wall. So Manet is playing with what's revealed versus what's concealed, what we can clearly see versus what's maybe hinted at just beyond our immediate view.
Right.
You see a similar thing, that enclosing wall and then a sort of fragmented scene restarting above it in the balcony too. It's like he's constantly challenging this idea of a fully discernible open space.
That feeling of confinement is just, it's palpable.
Yeah.
The figures are shoulder to shoulder, so crowded you can see the gun barrels are almost touching chests.
Exactly. There's barely any room to breathe in there.
But this is where it gets really thought-provoking, right? Given how crammed everyone is. Well, there's basically no physical distance between the firing squad and the ones being executed. They're practically on top of each other.
Yeah, visually they're right there.
Something really profound seems to be happening with how Manet is depicting the space and the figures within it.
Yes. And if you look closely, really closely, you'll spot the critical detail. The executed figures, they are noticeably smaller than the executioners.
Smaller,
Yeah.
but they're right next to them.
Exactly. This is significant because, well, in any kind of real-world scenario or even standard perspective, their physical size should be equal or very nearly equal. They're on the same ground plane.
Okay, so why? Why would Manet do that? Why render figures that way when they're on the same plane with hardly any actual gap between them? It seems to defy common sense, or at least how we usually see things represented.
Well, what's truly clever here, I think, is that Manet brought back a very, very old technique, something used in painting before the big revolution of the 15th century Italian Renaissance perspective.
Before perspective as we know it.
Right. He used this older method to shrink figures without actually spreading them out on the painted plane, without creating visual depth in the usual way. So the shrinking isn't meant to represent a perceived sensory distance. You don't see them as further away in the way you would in a landscape painting.
Okay.
Instead, it signifies a purely intellectual understanding. It signals that a certain distance, a conceptual distance, should exist between these groups, between the victims and the firing squad.
An intellectual distance.
Think of it less like a photograph, maybe, where everything is supposed to be visually to scale.
Yeah.
And more like maybe a symbolic map or a diagram, or even like some medieval art where size indicates importance, not physical location.
Right, okay.
He's indicating a non-perceived distance, a symbolic separation, and he's doing it only through their reduced size. It's a symbol, not a depiction of visual reality.
That's wild. So he's deliberately breaking what our eyes expect us to see. Is he saying our eyes are wrong? Or is it more that there's a deeper truth beyond just, the surface appearance?
Well, that's the big question, isn't it?
What's the bigger picture here? How does this connect to how we're, generally speaking, taught to look at Western art?
Well, if we connect this to the bigger picture, Manet is essentially turning centuries of Western painting tradition on its head, or at least questioning it deeply.
How so?
For centuries, especially after the Renaissance, art often aimed to perfectly mimic how we see the world, like looking through a window onto a realistic scene.
Right, the whole perspective thing.
Exactly, where distance and depth were clear, measurable, real, just like looking at an actual landscape. The traditional view is that painting perception was a kind of repetition or maybe an enhancement of our everyday perception.
Okay.
But Manet's radical departure here in the execution is that distance no longer primarily serves sight. Depth of field isn't really an object of perception in that traditional visual way.
Mm.
Instead, spatial position, the arrangement of figures, how far back they seem, it's determined only by symbols. Symbols that have meaning and function only within the painting itself.
So the rules of the painting are internal.
Precisely. For example, that relationship between the sizes of the figures, the executioners, and the executed, it's arbitrary in terms of visual realism. It's purely symbolic. It's not based on sensory reality.
Wow. So if I'm getting this right, Manet is basically telling us, the viewers, don't just take everything in this painting at face value.
I think that's a good way to put it.
He's saying, look beyond what you immediately perceive, because there's meaning embedded here that's not about what your eye sees, but about what your mind understands.
Exactly. It's almost like, well, it's like he's demanding a new kind of literacy from his viewers, a visual literacy that goes beyond just recognizing objects.
Okay, bringing this all together then. What Manet achieves in the Execution of Emperor Maximilian is, wow, it's far more than just a historical depiction, isn't it?
Oh, much more.
It's really a brilliant artistic statement. He uses these subtle visual cues, like the arbitrary shrinking of figures, to symbolize these non-perceived distances.
Mm.
And in doing so, he fundamentally challenges the norms of Western art and maybe even our basic expectations of how we see the world shown in a painting.
Indeed. Manet really pushed the boundaries there. He's inviting us, even today, to move beyond just that sensory perception
Right.
to a more intellectual understanding of art and what it can mean. He asks us to consider what else might be at play, beneath the surface, beneath what our eyes immediately tell us.
So, thinking about this deep dive, what really stands out to you, the listener?
Yeah, what resonates?
And then maybe leave you with this thought. If artists like Manet can convey such crucial meaning through symbolic, non-perceived distances in a painting, how else might art, or maybe even everyday life, be communicating profound ideas through subtle cues that aren't immediately visible?
That's a great question.
What might we be missing if we only ever trust our immediate perceptions? Something to ponder.